What up, nerds, and welcome to another backwards episode of Straight Chilling, the weekly horror movie review show where you chill and we kill, slice, dice, and chop up yet another horror movie. My name's Bob. I'll be your host for the evening. This is episode number 333, recorded on Sunday, August 22nd, 2021. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the winner of the August poll pick, which was Twin Peaks Fire Walk with me. Before we get into it, let me introduce everyone else on the show. First up, calling in from Washington, D.C., we got our boy, Randy. What's up, man?
How'd it do? I got a quick question for you, Bob.
Yes.
Are we going to talk about Judy?
Judy? Yeah.
Are we going to talk about Judy?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the whole show.
No, we're not going to talk about Judy.
Oh, okay.
What the fuck?
Teach me the ways. I don't know how to David Lynch. I can't do it.
Well, the first rule is you never talk about Judy.
Oh, okay. Well, it's like she's like Fight Club, apparently. I understand these rules.
Yeah. He's very, the Fight Club rules for Judy.
I got him. Last but not least, calling in from the deep, dark intro web, we got our boy, Soju. What's up, man?
What up? It's your boy, Sniatujos.
Dude.
Wow. All that conversation about me, my levels peaking, and you just blew our assholes out.
I saw the reaction, so I tried to take it down a scotch.
Yeah. Zoom doesn't like you screaming. Zoom took you out entirely.
So you will shut up now.
It's your boy, Sniatujos.
There you go.
Boys, I want you to take a look, though, now that I'm not screaming. Okay, in the behind the scenes, I want you to see that I'm about to take a sip, as Bob did last year. Mm-hmm. This is the Greater Pumpkin, which is a pumpkin beer made by Heavy Seas Beer, which is one I never had before this season. I picked it up at the ABC, and I am going to take a swig to kick off the spooky season. Here we go.
It sounds great.
As soon as it hits your lips.
The audio of this podcast is so
now,
good.
Let me tell you, this is a pumpkin ale brewed with pumpkin and spices aged in bourbon barrels, and it might be the best pumpkin beer I've ever had. It is fucking delicious.
The bourbon barrel age is never a mistake, I've noticed.
I meant to trade swap some out with Rob and just forgot the night we were hanging out. And I wish I had given Bob at least one because they are good. You need to pick some up, my guy.
I'll do that this week, man. Yeah, that's one I've never had before. I saw it on the shelf, but I went with my standard pumpkin because I got to get it in me. Ooh,
Bob.
Yeah, man.
It's here we go.
Put it in you.
It is.
Cheers, boys, because here we go. We are riding this spooky wave.
Oh man, I gotta do my own kickoff and watch something soon.
I went to a Spirit Halloween store yesterday.
Oh
man, I went from 6 to midnight. I was fucking loving every second.
I believe I'd be stroking.
It was incredible.
I haven't seen one myself, but I'm excited to kind of scope one out this week, actually.
Dude, yeah.
Find the nearest husk of a circuit city and it'll be there.
There's 3 open in town, and there's another, I want to say 3 or 4 that are going to open sometime this week. And I went to the closest one to me, and it was, stocked out the ass. Had so much shit. I already got my Halloween costume. I got some cool Beetlejuice shit.
You already got your costume ready?
Yeah.
And you did spirit version, I see.
Yeah, well, I was going to order it online. I walked in the store and they had another version of it. And I was like, well, fuck, I'll just buy it because it's right here.
Dare I ask, or should we save it?
Nah, we'll save it. All
right.
Mom.
Yeah, it's spooky season. Full swing. Loving every second of it. Let's go ahead and jump into some housekeeping real quick. Here's another reminder. We have our September poll pick currently posted on our Patreon website. If you support us at the $5 level or above, you get the chance to vote on a movie we're talking about this September. The theme for September is Halloween parties, and the 3 movies to vote between are Casper, The Guest, and Night of the Demons.
Hey, Bob, please tell me Casper's coming from behind.
Casper always comes from behind.
That's
How the
That's
numbers
canon.
looking, Bob?
Night of the Demons is still in first place. Casper is still in second. The Guest is still in third place. However, Casper has gained a few extra votes.
It's gained some ground. Last time I checked, I think it was 15-20.
Yeah.
Is that still it?
Yeah, that is still the same. So
The Guest, folks, we need you. We need you.
yeah.
put them in the demons, man. I want
Me
to.
and Logo need you.
Justin's over here buying votes.
Yeah.
Here we go.
What
again.
else is new?
Here we go again. Make sure you get your votes in before the end of August. We'll see what we're talking about this September. In other Patreon news, we don't have one. We don't have two, but we have 3 brand new Patreon supporters. We got to give mad
Holy
shout-outs
hot
to.
shit!
I know.
Ooh,
That's
my
awesome.
Lord.
Yeah, that's incredible. We really, really appreciate it, guys. Every dollar you contribute goes back into the show. It means a lot to us for sure. And big thanks to Tara L., Austin K., and Chad C. for signing up on Patreon and showing us some love. As you know, around these parts, we owe each and every one of you a straight chilling salute. These go out to Tara, Austin, and Chad. Here we go.
Slap my ass.
Uh-huh.
Slap me in the ass.
One more time.
Oh, God. Slap me in the ass.
Oh, God. Slap me in the ass.
We burned through our bumps this week.
Yeah, that is amazing. Thank you to
Yeah.
everyone that is supporting us on Patreon.
Yeah, we've got a lot of bonus episodes on Patreon. You can only get them on Patreon. There's I think we're pushing like 45 episodes on there, something like that.
Yeah, I saw you guys dropped a new one this week, speaking of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Randy
Thanks
and
for
I-
inviting me.
yeah, you're never
We said,
invited.
you know, fuck Soju. He doesn't like good film.
We Randy and I watched Pig, which is the latest from Nick Cage. It's very much a character study. It's not so much a horror film. It's a drama, if you will.
Yeah,
and we
A thriller,
talked about
huh?
that. Yeah, it's
I would,
thrilling.
I would say it edges on thriller.
It's thrilling.
Edges on, but I don't think it
Whoa.
takes the pie on it.
So yeah, you can hear Randy's and mine thoughts on that on Patreon. Something cool that Patreon does is if you sign up, it'll drop you a Patreon RSS feed, and you can put that into your podcatcher of choice. So if you prefer to listen
And
to
smoke
us,
it.
and smoke that shit. If you prefer to listen to us on iTunes, you can put that Patreon RSS feed in iTunes and listen to all of our bonus episodes on iTunes still. So it's pretty convenient for you. I think that's all we got for Patreon. Juice, do you have anything? Randy, do you have anything?
I actually
Oh,
have
dog.
no housekeeping this week.
All right. Our house is collectively clean.
Okay,
What?
we could just play the wrong bump, and that would be great.
Tight.
Randy's back on bump duty.
Uh-huh. And without further ado, let's get into the main event. We're talking Twin Peaks Firewalk with me, and we're kicking it off with the back of the box.
What's on the back of the box?
Guys, I did the right bump. Are you proud?
I
You
am
did it,
proud.
Randy.
Thank
You did it. It's hard work. I'm not going to lie.
I gotta remember shit. I mean, goddamn.
You got to
Just
press
means
buttons.
more shit I gotta do now.
What is that from?
What are we talking
Probably
about
this
today?
fucking
film,
movie?
Bob.
Okay,
You
dude.
amateur. You amateur. You don't even know Lynch, dog.
I
Are
am.
you even lynching, dog?
Did you watch
You
the
even
film?
know?
Whoa, phrasing. No, I am not lynching.
Oh, yeah. That's probably. That's
Wow,
not
let's
so
let's
good.
put it on the record. None of us are lynching.
Yeah. Yeah, I am very much a David Lynch. I don't know. I want to like him, but I'm not there. Like, I'm not a hater, but I don't fully get it. We'll get
Just a
into it.
pose. Maybe a poser.
We're gonna get into it.
We'll get into it.
Read the back of the box.
Yeah. So we're talking Twin Peaks Firewalk with me. This is from 1992. Runtime of 2 hours, 14 minutes. This was written and directed by David Lynch. Stars Cheryl Lee.
And Robert Ingalls.
Ray Weiss. Sorry, yeah, and Robert Ingalls. Thank you. A bunch of other people. The plot synopsis is as follows. In the town of Twin Peaks, everybody has their secrets, but no one more than Laura Palmer. In this prequel to his groundbreaking 1990s television series, David Lynch resurrects the teenager found wrapped in plastic at the beginning of the show, following her through the last week of her life, teasing out the enigmas that surround her murder. Homecoming queen by day and drug-addicted thrill seeker by night, Laura leads a double life that pulls her deeper and deeper into horror as she pieces together the identity of the assailant who has been terrorizing her for years. Gentlemen, had you seen this movie before? Would you recommend people check it out? Randy, kick us off.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, I've certainly seen this film. I'm a huge Twin Peaks stan. It's no secret. I mean, I put this on my list for my takeover month for a reason, and I was quietly pulling for it. I think this movie is fucking fantastic. I do have to say, and I will say over and over again, that much to speak to Rob's dismay towards David Lynch, this is not a film for everyone. This is not a director for everyone. And this movie needs the caveat of you kind of have to have not only watched Twin Peaks the first 2 seasons, but in order to get the most out of this and make the most sense you can, you need to have seen all of season 1 and 2 of the show. So I would not recommend it if you have not done that. And I think that it's well worth the journey anyway. But yeah, I would recommend both. This movie in particular kind of takes the whole Twin Peaks thing and really brings the horror element to bear, I would say. And we'll get into more of that obviously in a second. But yeah, recommend strong.
Right on. Soju, what about you?
I had never seen this movie before, and I feel like for this discussion and just in general for the podcast, I see myself as kind of the middleman of Lynch films. And so for my recommendation today, I would not recommend this movie. I don't think it can stand on its own. I have seen the first season of Twin Peaks and then the first half of season 2 of Twin Peaks. And I just don't think that this movie holds any kind of weight outside of the context of those films. It has some, but it's already a difficult movie to follow. And if you haven't seen Twin Peaks, there's absolutely no reason for you to watch this, in my opinion. I couldn't see how anyone who's not familiar with these characters or these plot points or like all the things that are going on could even follow this movie for the most part. So I just would not recommend people watch this unless you enjoy Twin Peaks and want to get what it is, which is a prequel to like a major, not character, but kind of like the whole starting point of the story of Twin Peaks. So in that sense, I would recommend, but for general audiences, hell no. Bob, would you recommend people check out this film?
No, I don't. I struggle with David Lynch. For context, I've seen the majority of the first season of Twin Peaks like twice. I've just been unable to finish it. And I've seen this movie now twice. And it's just really not for me. It's not very accessible. There's stuff that I do appreciate about it and about David Lynch in general. But like if we're just like blanket recommending this, I really can't. I just can't do it. I love talking to Randy about it because you're a Lynchian, you're one of the guys. I think, and I
don't like labels, Bob.
Totally. I look forward to hearing more from you in this episode.
I'm part of the mob of David Lynch. How else could you put that?
Yeah, I won't put it. I won't put it any other way. But I can't really recommend this. Can't do it. Sorry. Not a solid recommend from the Straight Chilling crew this week. But without further ado, we're going to drop the spoiler warning and get into the rest of the movie. Here we go. Spoiler warning. All right, let's get into the main event. Talking Twin Peaks Firewalk with me. This is usually where I type up the plot synopsis and explain the whole movie. However, this week I asked Randy if he would be so kind to do it for me because you generally have a better understanding of this whole franchise and this world. And I think you'll just do a much, much fucking better job than I could. So thank you, Randy.
As complex as this is, as complex as it is, I don't blame you. So I'll do this. for you. This is going to be a long one because I'm a hypocrite, and that's kind of what I got to do for this particular movie. I don't think there's a whole lot of ways around it, and I honestly, I fully expect one of you guys, at least one of you guys, to be like, "Oh, that happened," because it's that kind of movie.
I'm sure that'll happen at least.
Oh,
all right, here we go.
Jesus.
We open with FBI Field Director Gordon Cole contacting Special Agent Chet Desmond and Agent Sam Stanley, and as they are directed to investigate the death of 17-year-old Teresa Banks in Deer Creek, Oregon. The two are greeted by an aggressively unhelpful police outfit, which try to curtail the team throughout the entire investigation. Agent Stanley performs a field autopsy and finds a printed letter on white paper under Teresa's ring finger and a marking indicating a missing ring. After Agent Stanley heads back to Portland with the body, we witness Agent Desmond go to Teresa's home in a trailer park, and just as he finds the missing ring, we cut to another scene. Now in Philadelphia, Special Agent Dale Cooper meets with Gordon Cole and Agent Albert Rosenfeld to discuss Cooper's dreams when suddenly long-lost Agent Philip Jeffries appears, who is David Bowie, by the way, and begins screaming unintelligibly before disappearing. We are also interspersed with images of spooky characters Killer Bob and the Dancing Dwarf, a.k.a. The Arm, a.k.a. Mike, a.k.a. the Man from Another Place. I'm just going to call him Mike. And several other spooky characters discussing something called Garmonbozia. Back in Philly, Cooper reveals that he suspects there will be another murder in the future, similar to Teresa's. We arrive in Twin Peaks. 16-year-old Laura Palmer is an active teen juggling her relationships with Donna Hayward, her coke dealer boyfriend Bobby, a cocaine habit, a second boyfriend called James, her agoraphobic confidant Harold, her coke and drug problem, I already said that, her moonlighting as a prostitute, and of course, Meals on Wheels volunteer work. One day, Laura finds pages ripped out of her hidden diary from her room. She reveals that somebody called Bob has been stalking and raping her since she was 12, and this is the same Bob that we saw interspersed in that footage earlier. He's been raping her since she was 12, though it sounds supernatural in some way, which is what leads to her erratic and self-destructive behavior.
Bob, you dirty boy.
Bob, Killer Bob.
Wrong Bob.
After a frightening encounter with an old woman, Laura hurries home to find Bob sneaking around in her room, and then sees her father exiting the home a few minutes later, making her suspect that he was the mysterious Killer Bob all along, though she may or may not be rejecting that idea in her panic. The following evening, Leland verbally abuses his daughter at the dinner table as her mother begs him to stop. He then, teary-eyed, proclaims that he loves his daughter. Laura has a dream involving Mike the Dwarf and the Jade Ring that we've seen throughout the film, starting with Teresa Banks. She remembers suddenly that her old friend from sex work, Teresa Banks, had the same ring. The following night, Laura is followed by her best friend Donna to the Roadhouse, a sleazy bar, where Laura is pimped out to two men and arranges another drugged out night of sex with her friend Ronette, her pimp Jacques, and local scumbag Leo. She objects to Donna's presence, and after Donna is drugged and molested, panics and rescues her friend. Laura and her father are eventually harassed in a car by a one-armed man bearing the Jade Ring. He screams, "It is your father," to her, reigniting her suspicions of her father. It's revealed through flashback that Leland was a John for Teresa Banks and she had in fact arranged for him to meet two other girls, one of whom was Laura herself. He chickens out at the sight of her, but Teresa figures out who he is through this and attempts to blackmail him, leading him to murder her. One night, Laura is visited, as she often is, by Bob. He rapes her, and in the process, she begs the supernatural being to reveal his true nature, and he is revealed to, in fact, be her father, Leland Palmer. She now knows for sure and begins to spiral because of this. After final run-ins with Bobby and James, Laura arrives at the sex drug party at her pimp's cabin, where he and Leo tie them up and rape them both. Leland emerges, having followed Laura, and kidnaps both girls, taking them to a train car where Ronette escapes as the one-armed man throws Laura the Jade Ring. Laura puts it on, and Bob, through Leland, murders his daughter and sets her adrift on the river. He absconds back to the Black Lodge / Red Room that we've seen throughout the film and series, where he's revealed that the one-armed man and Mike the Dwarf are aligned, shall we say, and have won a wager that Bob must give him all of the pain and suffering that was a result of these actions, aka the Garmonbozia, and he consumes it. physically eats it, and it looks like creamed corn. We see a vision of Laura in the Red Room Black Lodge, accompanied by Dale Cooper as she is rescued by a guardian angel. There you go. That was as short as I could make it, and Lord knows I could keep going.
Dude, the creamed corn sequence, like when that happened, I was like, what and why is this? And
that's like one of those things that's like
he's eating
David Lynch
sadness?
can't help it making a joke out of like something really fucked up. Yes. So like at the end, they do not tell you what Garmonbozia is until the end, but he says Garmonbozia at the beginning as he's looking at this fucking big thing of creamed corn. And he says Garmonbozia later, and in parentheses, it reveals that means pain and suffering.
Yeah.
So pain and suffering comes in the form of creamed corn. And important.
Wait, what was the wager that Bob lost that they would find out?
And
his
this is
true
also
identity?
this is also extremely oblique. And this is one of the things that one of my critiques for this is that some of the clarification on this was left on the cutting room floor and the extensive deleted scenes. Although not really enough to be super clear even then. But yes, there's a wager or some sort of competition between Killer Bob and Mike / the one-armed man, who are aligned to see if Bob can in fact inhabit Laura Palmer the way he has inhabited Leland Palmer. So that's kind of the end goal for Bob, and they sort of make this wager. He's like, "I'll tell you what. If this is me completely rationalizing it the way that I understand it." So he makes this wager like, okay, well, everybody in this room, all those spooky characters, they feed on Garmonbozia, they feed on the pain and suffering of human beings. So they make this wager that if Bob cannot successfully inhabit Laura, that Mike and the dwarf and the one-armed man will receive all of that pain and suffering for themselves. And if Bob does succeed, then he gets all of that for himself. So that's why we see the one-armed man riding around with the fucking ring, and why the ring is so important throughout the story. It's what actually prevents Bob from inhabiting her in those last few seconds.
So the ring has some sort of protective power?
So the ring is created by... This is my understanding, is that the ring is created by Mike and the one-armed man as sort of like a totem for themselves that prevents, because they operate the same way. Like the one-armed man, it operates in the real world, or the dwarf operates through the one-armed man the same way that Bob operates through Leland Palmer.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
So they're that's their relationship. So in order to, you see what I'm saying? So he creates this ring that would basically prevent Bob from doing that. And in Bob's rage at having been subverted at that moment, he and Leland kill Laura instead of inhabiting her.
But Dale specifically told Laura not to wear that ring.
That's right. And that's one of the things that makes it so confusing. But you have to remember, like, and I don't know, you haven't seen the end of season 2. So we're in spoiler territory, so I'm just going to put it out there because it's important to that point. At the end of season 2, Dale is inhabited by Bob. He's tricked by Bob. Dale, in all of his, for all of his good qualities, is unable to do what Laura is able to do, which is subvert Bob and prevent himself from being taken over. So he's not necessarily, he's not 100% right all the time. And in that moment, he's being talked to by Mike, who is an evil entity. And he's basically saying, well, I don't trust this fucking guy. You shouldn't listen to what this guy is trying to do. But he doesn't understand the whole picture.
I didn't realize that the dwarf Mike was an evil entity. I thought he was like a counterpoint to Bob. I thought they
used to be partners. In the series, they make a point to say like Bob and Mike used to be partners in their killing and their seek for things. And now they're rivals. Is how
I see.
So rival,
they're
bad
both evil.
Guys. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Like if that's the simplistic way of putting it. And honestly, like this is up to interpretation. Obviously, there are countless fucking people that have different takes on this than I just laid out there. But I just and I have to rationalize it the way that makes sense to me. And that's what makes sense to me based on what I've seen.
That does help. make sense of things. One thing I wanted to start out with the discussion that I thought was fucking hilarious was, and this is how I interpreted it, and it made me think of Our Boy Bob. We got to distinguish this episode. But it was, so my opinion is this first like 30 minutes of the whole sequence about the extra agents disappearing and finding the Teresa Banks was mostly useless and should have been cut because this movie's long as shit. But I liked it kind of that the whole sequence where they're at the airport or whatever, and the chick comes out in the crazy dress, and he's like, "This is my brother or sister," and they do this whole sequence, and then the next sequence is the like lead detective pretty much breaking down everything. So it's such a clear picture, like, oh yes, this stomping, and I was like, this is fucking watching a Lynch movie. Like, this is the
funny.
key, and it's almost him making a joke at himself. I saw it and I was like, well, that's cute, or so. I don't know.
I think that lays the groundwork. Like, I don't know if it's a joke that he's poking fun at himself or not, but I do think that sort of lays the groundwork for, okay, everything in this movie is to be intuited and not necessarily make full sense. The fact that they have to use the dancing girl rather than just say the things that he just said to Sam Stanley, to Kiefer Sutherland, makes no fucking sense. So it's not really a matter of sensical thinking through. There are like bits of logic involved, and you make connections. It's more about intuiting the truth than it is about hard facts, is kind of where it's at. And the fact that he lays it out like that, I think kind of implies that that's how you're supposed to approach this movie.
I almost saw it as Lynch almost kind of like talking to the audience or helping the audience in a way of showing like even if things have connections, like, okay, you know, like, because when the guy explained it about the girl in the dress, like, they seemed like, okay, that you could, you know, like, everything at least made some kind of sense once he explained it, you know, but there would be no way that you would understand it had he not explained it. And so I kind of thought of that as a funny way of like, you're about to see some shit, and maybe down the line, somebody can explain it to you through these crazy convoluted ways. But what you're about to see is about to look as ridiculous as this woman doing this crazy dance. And I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah,
it probably like puts people in the right mindset if you're watching this movie without having ever seen the show. Like, you're like, okay, so this is what's going on. And he sort of tees up like what is going to happen story-wise as well as like tonally in that one sequence, which is just not really my vibe. I want to know, one of the many questions that I have is like, I'm curious about David Bowie's character, what Detective Jeffries. Yeah. What is his deal? Is he in the show at all?
He's not, and I'll tell you what like my opinion of that is that's one of the big moments where, like I mentioned before, that the cutting room floor kind of holds more truth than we get, and that I feel like is, to my mind, a fault in this movie. I would like to have seen the entirety of David Bowie's scene, but they intercut it really badly with the scene of the wager happening, which confuses both scenes. And the Carmen Bosia scene is extremely important to understanding, or to even beginning to understanding things. So to me, it's a huge misstep in that scene, as much as it, but the thing is, like, David Lynch always prioritizes feeling over facts and logic and all that stuff. So you can't argue with it really, whether you want to or not. But for my taste, it's like, yeah, okay, the Jeffries as a character is even more inscrutable as time goes on, because he's brought up in season 3. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that, but he doesn't entirely go away. But yeah, David Bowie's character, he's an agent who went missing, and it's actually detailed in one of the books as well. He went missing years prior, and then suddenly shows up in the field office and is saying all kinds of things and is pointing at Cooper saying, "Who do you think this is here?" And we know at this point, as Twin Peaks fans watching this, that Dale eventually gets inhabited by Bob. So this man is unstuck in time, essentially, and is scattered beyond reason and is unable to form thoughts coherently. And that's how I read it. And he's, you know, that's just basically, that's the basics of it, I think. And I think that I don't know why that's happening in that moment, But Dale obviously has a feeling about this because he's had a dream. He talked about he had a dream about this day, and he starts doing the thing where he's like standing in front of the camera and then moving away from the camera. And then eventually like a double of himself, a doppelganger, is in the frame as he's watching himself essentially. And Jeffries walks by. So like there's something supernatural about this day. And so and maybe it is that Jeffries is coming to visit this day. I don't know, but that's my read on it. Generally,
here's my like overall impression of what I've seen from the series and like how this movie faults as a movie, but also as a tie-in, kind of in a way, is that I think the whole sequence, I feel like it really like, as far as like a movie standing on its own, it wants to like tie in those things. Like, hey, remember when we mentioned this guy in the show? Like, here's a scene about it, and tie in.
They never mentioned him in the show.
And on. Oh, okay. Well, and even
he's entirely new in this movie.
Oh, okay. Well, then, the thing is like even mentioning Dale and honestly, like the FBI director and like tying those things in, and even like this first kill that was like briefly mentioned in the show, I believe, Teresa Banks, but like, and like the, the letter under her finger and stuff like that. What I saw this as, like, if I was like, okay, if I was going to take this as a movie as itself, and like what kind of intriguing story is it telling about this girl Laura, who spawns this whole series? But like, I found it an interesting idea of there's this girl in a small town whose father is sexually abusing her, and it creates this, it creates a hard life for her. She's 16. She's already prostituting herself out. She's doing heavy drugs. She's like pimping, hanging out with pimps and drug dealers. And that's become her life as a result of this. And like this whole mythology around it is really just kind of a Lynchian way to make it dramatic and crazy. But at the core of it, it's like, okay, that's kind of her coping and dealing with this. No, this isn't my father. It's this spiritual being Bob. But really at the core of it, it really is just about a girl being, sexually abused by her father. Now that's interesting, or, that can carry a really touching story. But what the problem is like tying into the show where you have to include like Dale, who in my opinion doesn't really have like a big effect on this movie and the story of this girl, Laura Palmer, and then tying in like, it's weird because I'm like, if you're going to like, they try to tie it in, but it feels like, I feel like they shouldn't have. And then when the parts that they did, I'm like, well, this feels lazy because like Dale's kind of thrown in there. And the people who I actually like kind of really like and want to see from the show, from my personal standpoint, like the sheriff, like Harry, and like that old guy, what's that old guy's name? No, the guy who always hangs out with Josie and like Josie.
Oh, Pete Martell.
And Pete. Yeah. I'm just like, well, they're not here. And you get a little bit of like Leon and you're like, that piece of shit. And Leo. but Leo, but he's not really the real Leo that we get from the show. And so that aspect of it kind of feels half-assed to me. And so I'm like, man, I feel like that really just kind of hurts the story of this movie. But like Lynch can't help but to like throw his crazy like lore in there and shit. I'm like,
See, now, okay, so I see, and I totally see what you're saying. And I, to a certain extent, agree. So the thing about this movie is that it has a really tough job to do. When this movie was coming out, Twin Peaks mania was fucking over. Okay. Second season of that show really turned people off. And in my opinion, for good reason, because it was really, really starting to become a shadow of what made it interesting. At a certain point, eventually it kind of picked back up and nailed the ending, in my opinion. But that second season really made people be like, fuck David Lynch, fuck this bullshit. This is just
I could not
a pretentious asshole. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth finishing. But I recommend finishing it. But anyway, that's not what this is about. But to the effect that, you don't have Pete Martell, you don't have Ben Horne, you don't have all these other characters. This movie has a difficult job to do because those characters are not really important to the story of Laura Palmer, the same way that you're saying Dale Cooper isn't. Dale Cooper is, but he's not really integral in the way he doesn't feel integral in this. And I think that this movie is trying to kind of have it both ways, where it's a really amazing, intimate study about Laura Palmer. And that's the movie that I'm most interested in. I think most people are with this movie.
Me too. Yeah.
But it's also trying to build on the lore that's there. And it's also using David Lynch's, toolbox to portray something really profoundly terrible in ways that are terrifying in unexpected ways. That's kind of what he is an expert at. There's like no gore in this movie, but I would argue it's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. Like there's some scary fucking scenes in this goddamn movie. And I think that, it's all through David Lynch's eye and tone and ability to bring, mundane things into the limelight as something scary. And I don't think that adding the scene that there is on the cutting room floor of Pete Martell and Josie Packard that is hilarious. It's a funny fucking scene, but it adds nothing. And there's scenes with Harry Truman. There's scenes with fucking pretty much any character you can think of. There are scenes for the most part that are on the cutting room floor because they don't add to that story and the movie is overstuffed. Now, I would argue as a fan that I would rather see all of those things reinserted than have it be have some of the gaps that it has right now in the lore portion of things.
Yeah.
But, given what we have, I'm still pretty happy with the final product. But it's not like I want to make it clear that this is for Twin Peaks fans really but it's also does not play to that audience at the same time, because this movie goes hard on the trauma that's at the core of that show. The undercurrent is what's being examined in this movie. In the show, it's an undercurrent of bad things going on. People with secrets. Laura was a dark girl, but we touched that fucking live wire directly in this movie for fucking like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
just like mainlining on the trauma that this girl is going through, and it's hard to swallow, especially with David's approach to things.
And that's why I really do feel like this movie is of two minds, like you said, and it really is unfortunate because it adds a lot of extraness, and like this movie's way too fucking long. But my favorite scenes were like what you said, because as somebody who watched the full first season and really enjoyed the first season. And I think what made that first season great was this play off of the kind of the soap opera, but at its heart had really like dark things it was really dealing with, but it was through this lens of like the melodrama of a soap opera, but also crazy Lynch shit. So it's like, that's super interesting. But where this movie faults, it's like, it has to incorporate those things. What I found the strongest points of like, it's just the straight following this girl through this terrible small time life where she's being pimped out, and that scene in that back room, and then where she sees her friend kind of get sucked into it and tries to defend her, and then you feel the heart behind it because you're like, man, this girl feels like she's not as valuable as her friend. And like those kinds of scenes where there's like real weight to it, not this floaty mythology that seems ridiculous, to be honest with you. Like to me, that's where this movie shined. And when I was in those moments, I was like, I can follow it and I can feel things, and I don't, but when it went to the crazy like one-armed man and the crazy like red room and the dude speaking all crazy, it just and honest still again that first 30 minutes to me,
no waste
cut that shit. Yeah. Cut that shit. That's how I felt. Bob, get in here.
I agree in that, like, if someone's sitting down to watch this movie that has not seen the entirety of the Twin Peaks show, like, you're gonna be able to follow, or most people are gonna be able to follow, like, Laura Palmer's story and gather that she's being abused by her father, and that is causing her to do drugs, act out, what have you, in this small town situation. And you can connect with her on that level. That's like, I don't know. I feel like everything else that like David Lynch is doing is also interesting, but the way he's choosing to convey those segments of the story, he's not doing so in a way that's like coherent enough for like a casual viewer, or even like somebody who's more than a casual viewer, somebody who like really watches a shitload of movies like fucking we do, is really going to be able to understand it. Like, I think it's really interesting to have these spiritual beings making a wager, and like they're wagering on these like human pawns. You know, they're the chess pieces on the board. That's like a really cool thing to ponder. But the way that it's conveyed in this movie is like damn near impossible to get. Like you're not going to be able to understand that that's what you're watching happen. So like, I respect David Lynch as a filmmaker. I think he's very talented and he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not like oblivious. He's a strong director. He really is. But it's just the way he chooses to tell a story is not an effective way to have people easily connect with his characters, which ultimately makes a less effective movie. I feel like he gets in his own way a little bit. I hesitate to use the word pretentious. I don't really think he is. I think he's just trying to
like,
tell a story
dictionary
in a different
definition,
way.
I don't think so. Because the man, like, because that, like, the implication, the pretension is the implication of there being a hidden meaning where there's not. Where there's not. Yeah. And I think the meaning of this movie is clear. It's about sexual trauma and families' cyclical nature of these kinds of abuses, and that's the core of everything. Yeah. With the entirety of Twin Peaks, like that is the catalyst for everything. So yeah, to that effect, I think like he's making a distinctive choice not to be accessible, though. I don't like he wants you to have your own experience with things. And I think he is telling a story that he intends to tell, but he obfuscates it intentionally, both in order to play off your expectations and in order to allow you the room to reach your own conclusions, which isn't always the case with movies. And I don't always like that in movies. I want to point that out. It, like, David Lynch is almost an exception to that rule for me, where, you know, I liked the core narratives to make a kind of sense. They don't have to be perfectly laid out, but I would like for them to have some sort of coherence. And maybe it's just because I'm familiar with him and I know how the show worked and things like that. And there's an established knowledge for me. And I can accept that that's probably the case, that I understand that what he's going for is really, he just wants to he wants you to float down this river that he's put out for you. And narrative comes absolutely second to feeling and intuition. And you're supposed to intuit things. And to Justin's point about Lil the dancing girl, like, that's what this is. Like, this is you having to intuit what things mean based on anachronistic, tiny little, hilariously stupid looking details that don't make sense on their own. Like fucking creamed corn. Like, why the fuck would he choose creamed corn? He did. And you know what? It tells the story. For me, having deciphered it in a way that makes sense to me and that seems to comport with not most, but a lot of like fans' interpretations of this show, I think that it's bold as fuck. And I think that the fact that we can still feel as much as we feel, this is where I disagree with you, Justin. Like, while I agree that having watched the show is like a requisite in order to understand the narrative, I think this movie stands on its own in one category in particular, and that is feeling. This movie, I don't think there's anybody that's going to watch this movie and not feel something for Laura Palmer. The fucking performance is too good. The subject matter is too dark. And the fucking, just the brutality of it all is like right at the fore. I don't see how somebody can watch this and say that they don't feel anything while watching it. And
I wouldn't say for anything. I would say the problem is like anyone who's not watched Twin Peaks and turns this movie on, and I don't think 90% of them would get through the first 30 minutes, to be honest with you. And I think that's a huge, huge fault of this movie. And I feel like it comes from that two-sidedness of like trying to tie in the lore and tie itself to the show instead of just being what it presents itself to be, which is like a straight prequel or whatever. I think that is a poor decision from a writing standpoint. And regardless of like the feelings of things, it's like, because from what I know, and I could be wrong about this, but this is kind of my impression and about things I've read, I think this is kind of the take, is that Twin Peaks, when they shot the pilot, it was longer than a normal episode, and they had shot a separate ending in case it didn't get picked up, so it could just be a standalone movie. And so to me, a lot of kind of like the lore that goes into some of the Twin Peaks, especially heading into season 2 and stuff like that, feels like I don't get, this is my personal thing, I don't get the impression that David Lynch just had this whole lore thing set out before, the season of Twin
absolutely
Peaks.
Didn't. I don't think he would even argue that he did.
Oh, well, okay. So I'm not trying to argue that that's what he says either, but that's the impression I got. If you're saying that that's correct, then it feels weak to me to then have this movie where it's like, oh, it's a prequel. We want to focus on this character, but we have to add in all of this lore, because to me, that's almost becomes the weakest part, because it feels like he's floundering a little bit, almost like he didn't feel as this would be as successful as having 2 seasons where the second one's like 20 plus episodes or something like that. And it's like, to me, like, it feels honestly like he's floundering and trying to make some substance out of nothing. And it's like, if you just focus on the story and not the lore, then it would be stronger. I don't think most casual viewers are going to get through the first 30
on the
minutes.
Lore. I don't like there's lore built into it, but everything is a means to an end, and that end is not the lore. It's not necessarily even the narrative. It's showing you. It's guiding you along an intuitive feeling. And eventually that it does lead to a pretty fucking strong narrative in Laura's case. But okay, I wanted to read this piece of trivia, which would have come later, but I think this will help you understand, this will speak to what you're talking about anyway. So according to writer Robert Ingalls, he and director David Lynch originally conceived this film as the first in a series of films exploring the mythology of the Black Lodge. To that effect, the two inserted 4 character outs, quote unquote, with which to continue the story: Agent Dale Cooper, Agent Philip Jeffries, Major Garland Briggs, and Agent Chester Desmond. The critical and box office failure of this film, however, caused Lynch to abandon any plans for sequels. Now, and to put that in perspective, the man was booed out of Cannes Film Festival. And
Pecans Film Festival.
That's pretty rough.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and like this movie deserves scrutiny, but I definitely don't think it deserves that, because my God, like, if nothing else, this movie has some of the best fucking acting from Cheryl Lee and from Ray Wise that I can imagine. Like, now here's the thing, they put it all out there.
Now I won't disagree with you, but now here's the problem. Because of the content that's available, and I agree with you that they did a great job, and that there is a core here that is beautifully destructive and like is really raw. And like you said, how could anybody leave this movie and not feel anything for Laura Palmer? It's because of David Lynch. I'm going to be straight honest with you, because I like some Lynch shit. I think he directed this poorly. I think he told this story of Laura Palmer and this raw shit that's like going on, and now you see parts of it. I think he did a bad job. And honestly, if anyone should be booed out of a film festival, especially given some of the content that he's given and some of the prerequisite like success that Twin Peaks had, I think
the film was booed.
Yeah.
Was like,
I mean,
the entire film. You think the film that's never happened before or since, for the record?
I think he did a bad job.
Yeah, I don't know if he deserved to be like booed out of Cannes, but like this movie is asking a lot of its viewers, and I assume most of the people at Cannes probably didn't watch the entirety of Twin Peaks, and like I had to watch this movie in 2 sittings, and I could barely finish it then. Like, it's just not very easy to consume in any way.
It's not very digestible. It's not meant to be. And I understand that that's not necessarily going to excuse it for people. Like, people are going to feel the way they feel about it. But for me, I feel like this movie is very deserving of praise, because a lot of the directorial choices, while confusing, are leading to the ends, which is to have this journey. And to me, for the most part, with some exceptions, towards the beginning, I think that there's some under and over baked things in the opening half hour, but the Laura Palmer shit, to me, for the most part, feels pretty complete. And I think that's like, I don't know. I understand that like as far as a narrative goes, it is not clear and it is not easy. This is not an easy film, but I don't think that making a challenging film is deserving of being booed out of a film festival.
It's not just challenging, because I'll agree with you that I feel like the Laura Palmer shit is complete, but to get to that complete story, it's also interspersed and interspliced with things that are absolutely not fucking complete. Like the whole scene with like her running into the one-armed man, and then like the dwarf saying, "I am the arm," and like I was even able to piece things later together where I was like, okay, you know, this man's missing arm. He says, "I am the arm." And I'm like, honestly, like really trying to engage with this movie, because I was just trying to. I just like wanted to not be the fool in the room who didn't understand what this movie was trying to do. And I was like really trying to engage with it. So while the Laura Palmer stuff is complete, and if it in itself for an hour and a half movie, then I would say bravo, David Lynch. Holy shit, you did it. But the shit that he interspersed, and that's why I wanted to pull in that critique, is where I was like, okay, it's so important to add in this Black Lodge. It's so important to add in these characters that you've seen in the Twin Peaks series. And yet when the series started off, that wasn't even the core focus of it. That kind of became part of its downfall later on. And I feel it's the same with this movie. Yeah, if you take the Laura Palmer aspect.
Correct.
Which part?
At no point was the show intended to be at no point was they were never even going. David Lynch never wanted to reveal her killer, even like that was a studio mandated decision that led to him walking off the show, and that's when the series started to drop. Is because
what about what I said? Do you disagree? Because what I was saying was that like what you agree with before, that the lore wasn't established before this Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I just don't think that it has to be
the weakest.
I think that like he's building upon blocks that he's already put down. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think you have to be fucking J.R.R. Tolkien having fucking maps drawn up of everything in order for. But I'm saying that your entire lore. You don't have to have your entire lore fleshed out in advance.
But where I agree
you can
with
feel
you
that out,
Laura
especially
Palmer,
when you're somebody who intuits things the way David Lynch intuits and expects people to intuit.
But no, I'm agreeing with you in a sense where the Laura Palmer stuff is there. The weakest part is the part that ultimately became part of the downfall of Twin Peaks, and that like a lot of this shit like it's interspersed and interspliced with shit that doesn't feel planned out or make any fucking sense.
I mean, it does to me. Like, I don't know what you mean. Like, what about this film is I don't see this movie. Like, this movie is not supposed to be sensical. Like, it's not supposed to make one-to-one sense. It's not supposed to comport to any reality that exists. It's a supernatural movie.
A complete story here. A very
but you have to tell a story in a sensical way. Like, think about any like. Our story's not allowed to be experimental.
But for you to say that this story is not supposed to make sense, I think is a cop-out, because there is a story here, a very complete story. Like you said, the whole story.
That is one story. There are other stories concurrently happening. This whole thing is like the Black Lodge thing is an addition. It's a thing that's growing out of this.
So then I would disagree with you in saying that mixing a complete story with an incomplete story, then I would say that that's a fault. I feel like that is a weakness. Because there is a complete story here, and you're taking a complete story and you're mincing it in with a incomplete story that you're supposed to feel, or it's
the entire story. So the Black Lodge shit. Let's think about this for a second. So the Black Lodge shit, the entire thing with Leland Palmer being possessed by Bob, like that is essential to the story that he's trying to tell. He is telling a story. Like this is a simile. This is. You know, in the series at one point, Albert, I think, says something along the lines of maybe like just positing this, and they don't expound on it. Maybe the idea of Bob is just the idea of the evil that men do. And so the idea that you're meant to play with is how culpable is Leland? And in order to do that, you have to give him like a narrative out for him in the form of this Bob character. And this Bob character also has to have a reason for existing in some way, have some interplay. Like, I think that it's perfectly fine to tell a non-linear, a slightly disorganized story if the intent is not to tell an organized story, but to elicit a certain emotion and feeling.
I would agree with you in a sense, but here's how you could fix that. Okay. You have this opening scene like they do in a similar way anyways, where you have this red room. And the problem is they try to mix in this character of Dale and his superiors and his like cohorts, which is completely unnecessary. If they focused on the Black Lodge, which is Bob, and focused from the red room, and they had this dichotomy where you have Mike and you have the one-arm man, and across from them is Bob and Leland, then that establishes some kind of connection. You say like, okay, here's one part and here's a counterpart. And then you don't have this thing where there are these agents who really don't affect anything in this story. And then you end the movie the same way, where you go to the red room and you see these people again. That makes it so much more cohesive. I
do get what you're saying. And I think I agree with that. I think that the problem that I have is, for me, and I think that the whole idea of involving like so much of the agents and things like that was to this end, like I was just saying, that to eventually expound later, that was cut short by its poor reception, which, for better or for worse, that's what happened. Like this was laying more groundwork for future tales, which we eventually got in the form of season 3, The Return, but which at that point kind of got nipped in the bud. So, I mean, to the extent that it adds a whole lot to the lore and narrative, that's definitely true that there's some stuff in here that doesn't. But to me, I feel like he had a tough job to do in bridging the divide between this movie and the series, because he's going from, fucking soap opera pastiche to, I would say, firm thriller horror area, and sexual exploitation being touched directly and things like that. And yet he has people that love this show, and he has people that he loves these characters himself, and he wants to pay homage to them in some way. And perhaps maybe the last time we'll get to see them. I think that it was maybe not the wisest decision from cohesion standpoint, to your point, but I would argue that I don't fault him too hard for that, because it's an extremely tough line to straddle, making this movie after that series and having that series be represented by all of these quirky characters, and having to go from quirky characters to the darkest soul of humanity.
I want to comment on that for a second.
Yeah.
Real quick. Let me jump in here. This movie, like you mentioned, Rainey, like David Lynch makes movies where like feeling is priority and plot is secondary. Like I can vibe with that. I understand that. A lot of like Italian cinema is very much in the same way. We talk about giallo on this show. It's very much the same idea.
Giallo,
and like crazy, because I have so much less tolerance for giallo. So it may be a character flaw on my part.
I am the exact opposite. Like, but so like I can understand that and accept that in a filmmaker. So like we're just looking at this movie the way it is delivered, and like there is truly horrific shit, like you're talking about, that sexual abuse and like these young teenagers taking hard drugs and prostituting themselves, and there's some like serious shit going on in this movie. And tonally, like I feel that is, like I almost feel like David Lynch is taking the piss out of that by having the next scene being followed up with like this kid running around with a papier-mâché mask with a super long nose on it, like dancing in the street, or like by having this crazy girl dance in the fucking the airplane hangar and then explaining it, or like having the arm eat creamed corn. Like there's just like nonsense, goofy stuff that's happening right next to like truly horrific stuff that actually does make you feel and connect with the characters. But then I
totally get that.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying, but to me, it's like a lot of that can, like, to varying degrees, I feel the same way. Like the cream corn thing, maybe to me is a little bit subversive of the seriousness of the situation, because it's so goddamn silly.
Yeah.
But I don't think the like Lil in the hangar, that whole, like, if you're gonna have the first half hour, if you're gonna have an entire section dedicated to the investigation of Teresa Banks, then that whole scene, like, that's the time to pack in the quirkiness. That's why you have like Hap's Diner, which is a fucking polar opposite of the fucking Double R Diner, and everything about that town is polar opposite to Twin Peaks. It's a doppelganger of Twin Peaks, and that is another theme of this entire franchise, is the idea of doppelgangers and tulpas and all sorts of like really anachronistic spiritual shit that people may or may not know about, but they're led to just sort of like go, that's the time to pack that shit in, to really like revel in some of the silliness. And then when you get to like I disagree about like the kid with the paper mache mask and shit like that. It's hard to, it's not easy to understand. And it's kind of on some levels like, what the fuck? Why is this happening? But that feeling of why is part of the experience that he wants to put you on. And I think that it's valuable in a sense of being uncanny and unsettling, having these extreme close-ups inside people's mouths and shit. Like when you sit down and say that out loud, it sounds hilariously stupid. But in the moment, it has, to me, a lot of like power, and it makes me feel dread. And like this movie excels like on that one aspect of the show, which is the feeling of impending dread from like mundane objects. The fucking ceiling fan that they show in both the movie and the show, that is like the most foreboding fucking ceiling fan you can possibly fucking imagine. But it's just a goddamn ceiling fan.
Yeah,
you know.
I agree with that. But in a certain sense, like I do want to use the word pretension when you're talking about like this evil spiritual being eating like pure sadness in the form of creamed corn. Like, it's just fucking a bad
Why is
choice.
That's not pretentious by the definition.
I kind of agree with Bob too. It becomes frustrating because if you're because I've on this podcast defended Lynch and the way that you make things a certain feeling, and in the way that we talked about Eraserhead, I even commented like I found it interesting that you make a movie that takes another emotion other just like comedy or love, which we see in movies all the time, and exonerating like anxiety, like turning that into a feeling that's the focus of a film. That's very interesting. And so I've been that defender, but when you're talking about taking a movie and making it more about a feeling, and you have this teenager who I agree with, nobody should leave this movie and like not feel anything for Laura Palmer, but how can you feel the ultimate dread and the ultimate like sadness and everything that's happened on when it's really the best word to describe them is wacky. These wacky things are interspersed and interspliced to make it just like anytime I feel like my heart is going out and feeling this dread or this emotion, it comes crashing down with like an eye roll of like, what is this bullshit that he's throwing at me right now? Because it's so wacky. It's not even within the same realm. It's like so outside the solar system that it's like, it just takes
it's outside the solar system of what you would anticipate from the narrative, but I don't think that's not. No,
it's so outside the solar system of emotional relevance. Like,
no,
really,
the
like
thing
what
is, it's not a movie about one emotion. It's not about feeling the emotions as they happen.
When I'm in a serious mood and I am dreading for this girl, and like Rob said, honestly, the next scene is like a kid hopscotching with this crazy mask and this wacky music playing behind them. Then I'm like, what do you expect my just natural emotions to go to? I'm not going to keep that mode of suspense or dread. I'm just going to be like, what the fuck is this bullshit?
Well, I mean, I think that comes from your expectation of what you're supposed to see next. And I think that what you're supposed to see next is not what you're given, and it's intentional. And I think that what happens to me in that scene, and the exact scene you're talking about, is more dread, because to me, I see, okay, one of these spooky fucking creatures is hanging around these events. This is, evil shit is fucking hanging around as these things are going on. And eat creamed corn, though as silly of a thing as it is, I just watched a fucking man murder his daughter. And I think that you may see that as, like undercutting that. But to me, it's more subversion than it is an undercut. To me, it's like if you are meant to truly just envelop this thing and adapt the things as they come along, then that just becomes part of the realm of what it is. And to me, I'm not always this forgiving, and I'll cop to that. But to me, this really all fucking works on a really like a heartfelt level. And I also am really interested in how the lore could work based on the evidence given, the things given, also knowing that it's just something that I'm constructing for myself.
I do want to, we got to land the plane, but real quick.
I know.
I have like one, I guess, final question, which it's a very vague question, but like, so I understand wanting to like subvert a moviegoer's expectations, because you surprise them, right? You want to surprise them, catch them off guard, and really like ramp up the emotions of the scene that you're watching. That makes perfect sense to me. But the way that David Lynch chooses to subvert things does the complete opposite. Instead of ramping up the emotions, for me anyway, it sucks all the emotion out of the scene and totally works contradictory to what you as a filmmaker would want your moviegoer to be experiencing, or at least what I think David Lynch would be wanting you to experience. So like,
continue.
My question here is just like why would you choose to do that? Maybe I'm just experiencing this movie in a way that David Lynch wasn't intending, and I might be a bit of an outlier, but like it seems as though his choosing to subvert expectations is completely sucking the emotion out of certain scenes of this movie for me. So like why would you choose that?
So two things. One, I definitely don't think you're alone in that. I mean, just there's 2-1 right now on that. Sure. So you're definitely not alone in that. This is, and to answer that question, I would say that I think that you're supposed to, I think that the subversions aren't meant to take you out of anything. They're meant to lead you down this other idea. Like I don't think you're supposed to adhere to anything like glue in this movie, with the exception of maybe Dread. And that's that. If it's anything else, I think that's true to, I don't know, that is like stand in for reality. Like fucking, like I think about, this is an example from the show, but I think about Leland Palmer jumping on his daughter's casket and the casket rising and falling up and down. You laugh at that, but it's also fucking heartbreakingly sad. It's a silly thing that happens in a really sad moment, and you can laugh at it and be saddened by it. And I think that Lynch is not going to adhere to just one emotion, even at a time. I think he's willing to allow the multitudes of combinations of emotions like lead you down your own feelings. And like I'm phrasing that poorly, but I think you guys see what I'm saying. Like it's emotions are a color palette that he's using, and he's mixing and matching in unexpected ways that aren't usually used. And I don't think that he's breaking those rules, quote unquote rules, unintentionally. I think he's doing them intentionally to get us to combine them and see what chartreuse looks like instead of straight green. You know what I mean? So that's how I feel about it. It's super easy and very, very common for people to label it as pretentious. And, I'm not going to sit here and argue with that because it becomes a semantic argument at a certain point. I will say that nobody is doing the things or has done the things he has done on the scale he has done. And if for no other reason than, challenging his audience and challenging mainstream audiences, I think that this work is extremely valuable, even amongst the valuable nature of his work as a whole.
Yeah, I vibe with you there. I understand what you're saying. It's just not for me. But anyway, like I said, we got to land the plane. Let's go ahead and rate Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me out of 5. Randy, this was your takeover month. This was the winner. Why don't you kick us off? How are you going to rate Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me out of 5?
So, I chose the category that I did for our poll pick intentionally. I know what I was doing. I know
what was the category again?
I remember it was like artsy art house bullshit, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Something that is like self-deprecating to a certain point, because I love this sort of thing. I love like a challenging film that also keeps me emotionally engaged. And that is this movie to a T. I'm intrigued by this movie front to back. I don't really get bored with it. I can understand how people do. I don't see how you could get bored with the Laura Palmer part, because that is probably the most straightforward David Lynch has ever been on a film in terms of his narrative. And maybe that's why it's frustrating to see it subverted in the way David Lynch subverts his other films. I can understand that. But for me, it fucking works. And to me, it's a fucking love letter to this catalyst character of a series that I already love. So there's already a feeling involved in this of love towards this character. And then Cheryl Lee's performance, it breaks my fucking heart in this movie. Even I don't have to be explained why there's an literal angel floating at the end for me to understand the feeling I get from watching that. And I think that's the intention. And with that in mind, like I would normally be harder on a movie for its structure not adhering to what we consider the quote unquote rules of cinema or whatever you want to call them, or the guidelines. Because this color's so far outside the guidelines that as to be laughable to even consider that. And because this movie and this director is so invested in the idea of what you're feeling, because that's the end goal of this, is what you are feeling, the emotional tumult and the blending of emotions and all those sorts of things. I'm going to rate it in that spirit, and I feel love for this movie. I feel a lot of love for this movie, these characters, this performance. There's a lot of things that if it was me, I would have done differently, but that's because I'm not fucking David Lynch, and I don't think the way the man does, and I wouldn't have the same aims as him if I was making this movie. And that's maybe for a lot of people that's going to be just fanboy bullshit, and I accept that full front. I don't give a shit. I love this fucking movie, and I think that it's a strong fucking film for me. And based on that emotion, on this movie about emotion and how to flow along the river of emotion, I give it a 4.5.
All right. 4.5 from Randy.
Yeah.
I'm going to slide in here real quick.
Whoa, Bob, pushing me to the back. Damn.
Sorry, buddy.
God,
Sorry.
Bob, out of 5. What are you giving? Fire walk with your boy.
Firewalk with your boy. Like I love talking to you, Randy, about David Lynch because you are very invested in his work. And like I see that there's a lot of thought put into what he's doing. I really believe he's a talented fucking filmmaker. And I do like some of his stuff. We talked about a few of his other movies on the podcast, and it's just for whatever reason, like Twin Peaks really doesn't vibe with me. And like, I wish it did. It's just sort of like he gets in his own way with this particular movie on a level that like exceeds probably any of his other movies that I've seen. In like Laura Palmer's story is the heart of this movie, and like you don't have a hard time like feeling for her. Like her situation is dire. Her performance is incredible. You connect with her easily, but then Lynch he drops a bunch of other stuff in there that could be very interesting and add to her story, but the way he chooses to convey those sequences is just like random. It's just like almost random choices. I know they're not random choices, but for somebody who's not like super steeped in like Twin Peaks mythology, they're going to seem random to you. And
I'll be honest with you. In some cases, they seem pretty random to me as a fan.
Well,
it's because it's coming from a man who wants to put whatever feeling that he's feeling about a certain thing or item, he can insert that and have that blend. Anyway, I'm sorry, I hate to do that, but
no, that's fine.
I love to do that.
I also I appreciate that David Lynch is making movies in a way that like he's intentionally coloring outside the lines. I think that's important. I think that's something that more filmmakers probably should be allowed to do, but the way that Hollywood studios work, it's just hard to get funding to do movies like this. And the fact that he's been able to do it for as long as he has is really fucking cool, and like I appreciate it, and I like talking about weird shit that maybe doesn't necessarily agree with me on the show to get like all of our various viewpoints and stuff. Like I appreciate it. I'm not here to like totally shit on it. It's just not for me. I do want to say one thing we didn't talk about is the score by Angelo Badalamenti, I believe is his name. I love the music in this movie. It's the highlight of the movie for me. I fucking love it. It's incredible. There's one, maybe two sequences where like Laura Palmer and her friend, they go into that pistol bar, I think is what it's called. And the music's like very loud, and everything they're saying like is basically inaudible, but you've got subtitles on the screen for you. And like the music and the lighting in that particular scene just like sucks you into the movie, and you are with those characters in that scene. And I feel like that's Lynch operating like he's banging on all cylinders in that sequence, and you're really really vibing with the characters and feeling for them. And like if he could have just like maintained that throughout the whole movie, like this would be an incredible like 5-star movie. But it's just like those sequences are few and far between, unfortunately. Anyway, I love the music. I love the acting. The performances are incredible. Ray Wise is fucking incredible. The lighting, a lot of the imagery is interesting, but it just doesn't stick the landing, and the tone is just fucking all over the place. It's highs and lows. It's everywhere. I appreciate what this movie's doing, and I think it achieves what it's trying to do, but ultimately my enjoyment of it is in the toilet. And I try to like balance those two things when I rate a movie, so I'm going to give this a 2.5, kind of right down the middle. Juice,
I'm actually surprised how high that is.
Juice, how do you feel?
Yeah, I got to give props to both of our boys today. I'm definitely more on Bob's side on this. But I will say Randy did a hell of a job defending some things and highlighting some things that really have, I know it probably doesn't sound like it through this cast, but have really helped me understand and appreciate this film more. Specifically, like the explanation of the relationship of the one-armed man with the dwarf, and then also Bob, and that whole sequence, like that makes me appreciate a lot more, and other things as well. But at the same time, I feel like there's some of the defenses that Randy used that I've heard him critique in other films, film series and stuff that I'm going to bring up as part of my review. I'm definitely more in the realm of Bob here. One of the highlights in like capital letters that I have on here is the soundtrack is baller that we didn't talk about in our regular stuff. I like the whole like kind of noir mix in. It's a great flavor that I love that David Lynch kind of mixes in with this whole thing. And it's one of the things I loved about the Twin Peaks series itself is that kind of mix in. I love that emotion. To talk about Randy's one highlights, I liked the metaphor that he kind of used about almost like a color palette where you have these colors that maybe you don't see, like you're decorating a house. The first thing I thought of when Randy said that is you're decorating a room and you're choosing these colors, and you have two colors that technically like work together, but you don't see often. Yeah. So in that, so what the first thing that popped in, or one of the things that popped in my mind, is that scene that Bob was talking about, because I agree that whole scene in the club, that was my favorite. I loved the lighting. I love the emotion that went into that, but interspersed with that as like the counterpoint, if you will, if we're using Randy's metaphor of a color palette, is fucking Jacques and his dialogue of I'm as blank as a fart, or this is my high school sandwich. Let's put some meat inside. That shit was just too much for me, honestly. I know we want to show,
creeps me out.
I want to know
that's
that
Cooter behavior.
I know we want to show this man as like incompetent and stuff like that. But when I am fully in myself with this girl who I have like nothing in common with, 16-year-old girl, in this situation, I can like feel this situation, and this line of dialogue is delivered. I'm as blank as a fart. It takes me from here and sucks me out immediately. And I'm like, God damn.
I couldn't feel more different about that.
That's how I feel about it. And while it might highlight the character of this despicable person, I already had that image of him. At no point did I respect this man, or did I think I already thought he was the lowest of the low and gross and disgusting. So I don't need that ridiculous line of I'm as blank as a fart to make me feel that towards him. He's already low and scummy and disgusting and pimping out 16-year-old girls. I don't need a ridiculous line, I'm as blank as a fart, to make me feel any way about this man, except that it pulls me out of this movie. Another thing, we've critiqued this before, and I'll hold it true to this movie as well. This woman's 26-year-old playing a sexually active 16-year-old girl. Like, that's still not chill with me, the way that that's used, the way that that's displayed. I know that they want to use the same actress they used when the movie started, and I get that, but still it's problematic for me. So this girl is very sexually active. Yeah. She's doing a lot of disturbing things as a 16-year-old. She's a 26-year-old woman. I mean, come on. Another thing, like one of the things Randy was talking about, and I don't even know if it was necessarily a defense, but in just like talking about like the structure of how this was, in that he intended to make more stories and stuff like that. That's the same thing that I've heard being critiqued about, like, for instance, the Marvel series. It's like, this is just a thing that's connecting to other things. And I think that that's still hold true. It's like it flattens out the overall movie. If like the first 30 minutes of this is intended to connect it to another movie or another story, well, then that's flat for me, because it feels like an advertisement for something that I'm not watching.
And that's the thing. I'll argue with you on that. I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but like that, like the difference between Marvel and fucking David Lynch's work is so stark. One is a commercial product made by
the work is stark, but the thing that you implied is like, yeah, the reason that this first 30 minutes exists is because it's supposed to connect.
It's laying a groundwork, but it's not a commercial for the next film. That's a different.
Marvel does.
No, that's very different.
Marvel movie.
No, like Iron Man coming in and saying, "Hey, I want you to join the team, Captain America," and everybody knows where that's going. That is a commercial. Having fucking a new character arrive and then mysteriously disappear, like that's not the same thing. That's not a commercial for a new film. I mean, in a way it is, because the whole thing about Twin Peaks is like, you're gonna get the answers. Watch the next thing and you're gonna get the answers. I think that's literally not. That's the opposite of what David Lynch wanted for the show.
Well, I don't know. I think that's where a lot of the advertisement goes. Anyways, another thing I want to point out, I saw a lot. Now, this is a movie that I really respect and enjoy from David Lynch. I saw a lot of like early Mulholland Drive in this film. Mm-hmm. Like some of the things and that movie came like 9 years later. So I think he perfected maybe some of those, dichotomies and like shifting tones and stuff like that, because I really do enjoy Mulholland Drive. Overall, though, I feel very frustrated by this movie. I, like Bob, really struggled to get through it, but I was putting a lot of effort into trying to understand it and feel it. I really enjoyed the story of Laura Palmer. I really enjoyed the club scenes. I enjoyed the scene where she goes to the shack, the ending, because even though it's been a few years since I watched Twin Peaks, they reminded me of what was going on in Twin Peaks. I was like, yeah, that feels grounded and everything. All of the other stuff that was very hard to follow, the one-armed man situation, the first 30 minutes, I feel like they didn't set it up clear enough between the rival evil entities. Those were very frustrating for me. And overall, I'm going to give this movie a 2 out of 5, but I am a man of a code, and it's going to be half star for the Yabos. So we're going to end it at a 2.5 out of 5.
Ample Yabos in this, if nothing more.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of Yabos.
Justin's
they're not
2.5 is going to put our aggregate at a 3.2. Let's go ahead and jump into our Rotten Tomatoes segment and see what the critics and users think about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Certified.
All right, we blew a lot of time talking some bullshit, so I'm going to go quick. This segment, I'm going to have these gentlemen guess within the best of their abilities the critics and user score on RottenTomatoes.com. I'm going to start with the critic score. There are 75 reviews from critics. Soju, what do you think the critics' aggregate score is? What percentage are positive?
I think Lynch buys a lot with the critics, but I even like him being booed out of the fucking film festival. And I don't think this is regarded as one of the best Lynch films. So I'll give him like a slight boost with the critics, but I'm not going to go too high. So I'm going to say 60 dudes.
60 dudes. Bob, where are you at with this one?
I think it's lower. I'm going to go 55.
55 dudes. Yeah, so Soju, you're going to take this one, and you're pretty close. It's a 64%. 64%. And it was a good instinct because this movie was widely hated at first, and I think that a lot of that was cultural backlash of Twin Peaks. That seems to be what most people think now with hindsight, is There's a lot of backlash for the failings of the series Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And then like Roger Ebert was notoriously a dick about this movie. but in recent years, its reputation has grown, and it's actually, I mean, it's a Criterion pick for a reason. People do love this fucking movie, but it's mostly Twin Peaks fans, in fairness. So yeah, 64%. Let's go to the
Bob,
score.
can I get a hell yeet?
Hell yeet.
Hell
It
yeet.
just means I've more shit I gotta do now.
All right. Let's go with the audience score. There are 25,000 plus ratings for this film on RottenTomatoes.com. Rob, we're going to start with you this time. What percentage of the critic or the users gave this a positive review?
You said there's 25,000?
25,000 plus.
Plus, okay. Man, I don't know. Just give me a 50.
50. Right down the middle.
Yeah.
Soju?
I think it's going to be higher than that because I feel like the people are going to come out to support this movie who really love it. But 27,000 is quite a bit. I feel like there's going to be people who me are just like out of spite want to be like, fuck this movie. I'm going to rate it bad.
I mean, they did right out of the gates.
Yeah, I think
Critics
it's
sure
going to
did.
be higher than 50, but not much. Wait, Bob said 50, right?
Yeah.
50, yeah.
I'll take the 55.
55. All right. So, Soju, you're going to take this one. It's a sweep for you, but you were not entirely close on this one. It is a 78% positive.
Holy jeez.
78%.
They really came out. But the most important thing is I got a head yeet sweep, boy.
The critics' consensus reads as follows. For better or for worse, Twin Peaks Fire Walks With Me is every bit as strange and twisted as you'd expect from David Lynch, which I don't think is entirely unreasonable. Let's see. I don't know. Random negative review, just real quickly. In Twin Peaks, the movie, all the twists get straightened out. The thrill is gone. That's
wrong.
That's nonsense. What is with these fucking reviews, man? I don't get
wrong.
it. It's like nothing is straightened out. The fuck are you talking about?
That's wrong.
Okay, here's another
Wow.
one. There have always been two sides to Lynch, the inscrutable demonic prankster and the rhapsodic dreamer. In Fire Walk With Me, he's at least trying to recover his poetic sincerity. If only his dreams weren't starting to look like reruns. It's kind of funny.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, that's fair because the incorporation.
I don't agree, but
Like I would agree to a sense of where like the incorporation of the Twin Peaksy stuff. Like I have to show you these characters. It was the worst part for me. Like just show me Laura Palmer and I'm down with it. So I get the whole reruns aspect.
Well, by the way, I want to point this out. If you are interested in just the story of Laura Palmer, The Diary of Laura Palmer is a companion book that came out around the time of the second season. And it is essentially just the Laura story, period. And it's written by David Lynch's daughter, which makes it all the more kind of fucked up because of what it's about the central story for Laura. And it is a deeply goddamn depressing book, but it is super, super affecting. And
well, I'm in.
So there, and it's also pretty short. So
Okay. That does sound interesting though.
for a book, you know.
I will say this I really enjoyed watching that first season of Twin Peaks. I talked about it. If you want to go back, I think 2017, mid 2017, if you want to go back to some of our episodes, listen to me talk about how much I was enjoying the series at the time. I really did. And like watching this kind of brought me back into some of that. And I was like, man, that was really good.
David doesn't do answers. He just does fucking intrigue like a motherfucker. There's so much more I want to talk about, but Rob, continue us. Force me to continue.
Yeah. Do you have like a ton of trivia that you think would add a lot, or is that something
I intersperse the stuff that I already know as being kind of important.
Okay.
I think like there's stuff I haven't read through all the stuff on IMDb. There's a lot of it though. I would say that I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in here that's kind of cool, but I don't know if I can sort through it just now.
Okay.
I would rather just talk about great parts of the movie. But
Well, then let's go ahead and skip trivia and get into Cooter of the Week.
Straight chillin'. Cooter of the Week.
Juice, what's Cooter and why are we hunting him?
Let me tell you all about it, Bob. Cooter is a character type and a straight, chillin', exclusive Cooter must hit 3 of these 5 points to be considered a Cooter. We want the Cooter with the most points for Cooter of the week. The 5 points are manipulation, smug arrogance, overall look and attire, overall patheticness, and which is the one I missed? Manipulation, I think.
Patheticness? Did you say patheticness?
Yeah, overall patheticness.
Manipulation, arrogance, deviancy, sexual deviancy, look and attire, and patheticness.
Yes. So I would like to nominate the first Cooter of the week, and I've been waiting for this moment for a hot minute now. I would like to nominate Bob as Cooter of the week. Bob,
no. Bob, no. Bob, no.
Let's go ahead and start this by saying that Bob is a sexual deviant. Can we all agree to that? Can we all agree that Bob's a sexual deviant?
Deviates sexually, that Bob.
Yes. So like Bob is a like spirit, a demon.
Demon Cooter.
He's okay. Yeah. So we're not talking about.
He's not a thing that you can identify through like mythology. It's not like a demon specifically. He's just an evil fucking thing.
So are we saying Leland Palmer was being controlled by Bob? So we're separating Leland from Bob.
This. My theory
I thought
is
that was like a metaphor to use those things, but I mean, in the
think it's
context
both.
of the movie, I guess.
I think that within the lore of the film and the lore of the franchise, Bob is an entity to and of himself who can inhabit people and who coaxes people. Doesn't force people necessarily, but coaxes people to live out their worst selves and damage other people, which is what makes him such a potent tulpa for like sexual abuse. Like if you're sexually abused, you're likely to then become a sexual abuser, statistically speaking. I think that's kind of the metaphor at play. I think it's implied in the series that Leland was abused as well.
Or you could take the route that like
the show
Bob inhabits people that he knows that he can feed off of. And we already know that Leland was doing some dirty deeds going on. And so if that's the case, then you could put it more on Leland in that, like, why would Bob inhabit him if he wasn't already, like doing deviant shit?
I think Leland is culpable. Leland is absolutely, I think he's absolutely culpable, but Bob is the devil on his shoulder, so to speak, who he can then, at least in the show tries to write it off as, I didn't know what I was doing. Then this movie kind of self-contradicts and tells a different story.
The reason I asked for clarification is we could treat Bob and Leland as two different characters, or we gonna or the same. So we got to like decide what we're fucking doing here.
I think you could do both. If you want to go, I think that they have the same crimes, really, though.
Just trying to clarify.
So, I think the crimes are the same, so we can group them together as far as I'm concerned, like just for ease of use.
So definitely sexual deviance, definitely manipulation,
definitely,
smug arrogance,
yeah.
For Bob specifically,
sure.
And for Leland too.
Well, yeah, that's true. Patheticness, I think, belongs specifically to Leland, though.
To Leland,
he is doing this because he's not a strong enough person to deal with his trauma in a way that doesn't traumatize his daughter.
Especially if you knew about some of the shit that goes on in the show. He's got some really pathetic.
Yeah, he's a pathetic motherfucker. But he has a great singing voice. We'll give him that. Look and attire.
Everything but attire. I think he's fine as far as the attire.
No, Leland, I think, looks dapper. I think that Bob's Canadian tuxedo leaves something.
Dude, I wrote that down to the Canadian tuxedo for Bob.
I don't know. Yeah. It's a weak point, I think.
It's the 90s. But the 90s really wanted the devil to be wearing denim all the time. It's this in the stand and like just denim wearing motherfuckers.
Now, one thing I was going to say about Lynch is he picked Bob as like this character to show off as like this menacing thing. But even that kind of felt weak to me. Even in the show, when he first appeared in the show, I was like, this feels a little silly.
Oh, man. Bob scares the shit out of me.
Really?
So we have officially booked Bob and Leland. They've got four.
I would like to say Bob is for sure a Cooter, and we need to book him. Bob is a Cooter. Let's book him.
Yeah, someone's really trying to get a sound bump out of this. It's very, very clear. There's an infinite number of Cooters in this movie, I feel like fucking
Dude,
Jacques.
Jacques
Cousteau. Jacques Renault is the perma-Cooter of this show. He's just the most obvious, like, on-site. That's a Cooter.
Oh my God. That dude's Cooter for show.
Like, Jacques and Bobby.
Bobby's a Cooter. Leo is a Cooter, even though we don't see a ton of him. Like, anybody in that fucking pink room is
fucking David Lynch,
dude. James
James is a high on the pathetic charts, certainly.
Dude, quite high on the pathetic chart.
Fucking James.
Oh my Lord.
James is one of the most polarizing characters in the show too, and I love him, but God, they fuck him up.
If you want a good time, go to YouTube and type in James song Twin Peaks and just have a ride.
Dude, I love that song, but people hate it, and I get it.
I hate it. It's so fucking stupid.
It's stupid. I liked it, but yeah, I get it. I get it.
I feel like for brevity's sake, instead of going through every single Cooter that's in this movie, we should just coin King Cooter as being like Bob and Leland and then move on.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a shitload of others.
But there's
they're the Cooters
and
of the
Bobby.
week.
But I will like to give a little aside in that during Eraserhead, I questioned like, can David Lynch even, create a Cooter and all his like crazy mysterious ways? He's
challenge accepted.
Yeah, he knocked it out of the park with this one.
Town filled with Cooters. Here you go.
Oh yeah.
Fucking
so we got him, boys. Bob is the Cooter. Lock him up. We got him.
Yeah, sound clip. Got it. We got it. Let's go ahead.
That sound clip.
We're letting our hair down. We're talking about what we've been watching this week.
Hey gang, what you been watching?
Randy, what you been watching?
Let's see. So I this past week after visiting with you guys, I was with my future in-laws at their place. And so a lot of what I watched was informed by that. And I didn't actually watch a whole lot in general. But one thing I did watch a lot of was The Love Boat. And that is a hilariously chintzy, stupid show that I kind of was charmed by. It's like the most 70s thing that you can fucking imagine. If you're not familiar, it's a show about a cruise ship and love stories that happen thereupon. And there's a cast of characters that are on the ship, as well as every week different guest stars from the wide array of 70s celebrities like Charo and John Ritter and like fucking Gomer Pyle and all kinds of motherfuckers like that. So yeah, it's super dumb, and I kind of liked it and I kind of loved it, but I could only take so much of it. So yeah, I watched that. I watched Woodstock 99, that documentary, and it made me feel really bad about my whole generation for a little bit. I've been starting to read House of Leaves. I might have mentioned that before. Mm-hmm. I have not gotten too far into it still, and I'm enjoying it, but that's a pretty tough one. That's a difficult book as well, just because of the multiple through lines of narrative. I started reading a book called In Defense of Ska, which I fucking love so far, and really, really hits me in some very personal musical
hell yeah
tough places. It's good shit. It's basically fuck you, anybody who's ever said ska sucks. Fuck you. Because this, like, it's just basically its whole thing is like ska is like the only genre that doesn't have a large group of vocal supporters that are like, hey, no, this is really great. And that people look to and that write, loving fucking Rolling Stone reviews towards, or people can fucking, they say like, I read this article waxing poetic about grindcore bands the other day, but why not fucking ska? Just having ska as part of your history. Like Dan Deacon was into ska and they tried to like, they made it like a big scandal in the fucking music press. Like Dan Deacon was in ska, and people like thought less of him because of that. And that was bullshit. Ska's amazing, by the way. It's a great fucking genre.
Hard agree.
And I love this book so far. So yeah, fourth wave ska, I'm all about it. Let's do this shit. Not that it's truly ever completely gone away, but in the public lexicon, it might as well be. Its name is Bud, and I want it to not be that anymore. Other than that, let's see. I finished Memories of Murder by Bong Joon-ho. I really, really liked it. I talked to Rob about it afterwards, who had told me frequently that he didn't like the ending, and then it sounded like he did not understand the ending at all.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, when I watched that movie, I was like nodding in and out. Like I was desperately trying to stay awake. So when I saw the final sequence, I feel like I was filling in scenes that I just didn't actually see and completely misunderstood the ending. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And, I recommend you watch it in the day next time. Wide awake.
It's a good fucking movie. Yeah. It's a good fucking movie. And I also watched a movie called Pray Away, a documentary rather, that's a Ryan Murphy thing that's about people who were formerly spokespeople in the ex-gay Christian movement. Basically people who were like, I used to be gay, but I went to this thing and I became not gay anymore, and you can too. And it was like a big grift, and it still is. But who have since turned around on that and said, like, I can't believe I was doing that. I was hurting people and all sorts of shit like that. And, it's not the best documentary in the world. I wouldn't say it hits its full impact like it could, but it's worth a watch. It was informative to me. I didn't know a lot about how that stuff operated, so it was a little informative anyway. Yeah, that's it.
Sweet deal. Juice, what you been watching?
Boys, I broke the seal. I watched The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Damn, you went balls deep.
I did. It's that time.
Man, has anyone ever described The Great Pumpkin as balls deep before? Dude, I hope so.
Anything goes. And boys, I broke it. It's like a wonderful little. It's a fun, like, if you want to like get super serious about it, which I'm going to because I'm drunk, is I love the whole just critique on, what you believe affects like your good time. But like, I love the idea. It's such a like interesting idea to mix the mythology of like the Great Pumpkin with Santa Claus, because like 2 months earlier, you're a fool and you're wasting your time and you miss out on Halloween and you're not part of the masses. But 2 months later, and it's like you reap all the benefit. It's the same belief and the same ridiculous thing, and yet everybody
has to agree to it for it to matter somehow.
Yeah, you have to be part of the group for it to benefit you, for you to able to enjoy in the festivities. Or at least have a group that does it. Yeah, and benefit your life. And so that was interesting this time around. I mean, that's always kind of linger, but I was like, oh man, like, the poor old Linus, it's the same exact belief. And even the letter that he reads or that he writes is like, oh, I know you don't get as much publicity as Santa Claus. It's like, it's the same belief. It's just like 2 months earlier and everyone just shits on him for it. But he does miss out on Halloween. He does miss out on the Halloween party. He misses out on trick or treating, all because of this belief that he has, which is like, interesting within itself.
That's a whole psychology thing I want to talk about one day when we have time.
I want to add real quick that my favorite aspect of the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown is like the requirement of sincerity for the Great Pumpkin to visit you. Because Linus is trying to pick the most sincere pumpkin patch to ensure that he will be visited by the Great Pumpkin.
He keeps talking about how sincere it is.
Yeah, like you have to fucking believe for this.
And then even when it doesn't. But that's perfect too within the realm of belief, because then once it doesn't work out for him, he's like, next year I'm going to pick the most sincere pumpkin patch. It's like there's a reason. There's a reason why.
That is again, that's like a psychological concept. What is that, like loss aversion or fucking a sunk cost fallacy or some sort of shit. Yeah.
But the same thing could work with Santa Claus. It's like, why didn't you get presents? Well, but in that realm, it's like, why didn't you get presents? Oh, I wasn't good this year. I wasn't good enough or whatever. Like that measurement. It's like, oh man, that's some twisted shit. But I broke the seal. And it's like, man, it gave me even the illustrations of the autumn leaves, and I was like, oh my God, here we go.
You could follow
Such
that
a much deeper read on that movie than
you
I
can follow
expected.
that train of thought out to like some very dark, extreme places, but I love it in context of this like just innocent child trying to have a good time and believe in this fictitious character. Anyway, that's a
Man,
whole
if you don't
thing.
find the most sincere pumpkin patch, you're fucked.
You're
Dude,
fucked.
we all know that.
I watched that shit. It was great. Another thing on like a totally different note, that was the only kind of like Halloween-esque thing I watched this week, but I'm like diving in. Here we go. Everybody join. Let's go. But I watched also the Hunger Game film series, like the whole thing. And one of the reasons I did is because I had read those books years and years ago and really enjoyed them. I thought they were pretty well written. And I had watched the film series and enjoyed them for the most part. But what they did was it was a trilogy in the books, but they split the last movie into two. So it was like part one, part two. And I had watched part one, but like never saw part two. And it popped up on the Peacock app as like, oh, film series that we have available. And so I was like, shit, I never saw that part two, but I really enjoyed that book. And so I was like, well, I don't want to jump, in a part two. So I was like, I'll rewatch the series. And I did. And I actually think I really like those they wrapped it up pretty good with the part two. I finally got to see it. But those first two movies are really solid, actually. I think they do a really good job with the world building and representing the books, like pretty good. It's never going to be as good as the books, but I think that's pretty solid. And they do a pretty solid way of interpreting this, like, you have to send your children to sacrifice themselves to die. Like, I don't know. I think they did a pretty good job with it as far as like a Hollywood blockbuster or whatever. And I actually really enjoyed rewatching them and finally finishing the series with, the part two of the third series or whatever. So I don't know. That's what I watched this week and I enjoyed it. I was down for it. But yeah, Bob, what you been watching?
What have I been watching? I checked out that movie Nobody that came out over the summer.
The Odenkirk one?
Yeah, Bob Odenkirk starring John Wick-ish, if you will. It's written by the same guy that wrote John Wick. Bob Odenkirk, it's sort of like a breaking and entering that happens. He's married with kids. These people try to rob him. And he has a very clear moment when they're robbing him where he could intervene and potentially take advantage of the robbers, and he chooses not to do so. And they end up getting away, and his family sort of like shuns him for it, although like nobody's really harmed. Like his family's still okay. And ultimately, he probably made the right choice. I mean, he did make the right choice. Things didn't escalate. He chose not to escalate the situation. He I don't know. The situation spirals out of control, and it turns out Bob Odenkirk is not just your average middle-aged dad. He's this military badass that has since retired and of
course.
Yeah, can do anything that he wants and take out a whole slew of people with his fists or guns or whatever's around him, and he's literally unstoppable. He's an unstoppable force.
That's hilarious. I have a hard time seeing Bob Odenkirk as a Max Payne type.
I do like. I am sort of two minds when it comes to this movie. Like, I enjoyed watching it. Ultimately, Bob Odenkirk did a really good job. It's a fun action popcorn movie. But also, like, just for my personal tastes and like what I'm looking for in entertainment in today's day and age is not like just this middle-aged white man who can do anything he wants to anybody and get away scot-free, completely unscathed. It's just not what I want, really. Not a bad movie.
That's where you're headed, Bob, though.
Yeah, it's just...
Doesn't that empower you?
No, it really doesn't. It's a fun popcorn flick, though. I watched Suicide Squad, which ultimately was yet again another popcorn flick. It's on HBO. It's the best DC movie I've ever seen, which is not a high bar. I feel like most people agree with that statement anyways. I don't know. It's long in the tooth. It's like 2 hours, 20 minutes or something like that. Ultimately, I enjoyed the ride and I would recommend watching it. It's a good time. Also watched this show that's on HBO Max called White Lotus. It's a mini series. It's only 6 episodes.
I heard that's good.
It is very good. It's got fucking Steve Zahn in it.
Well, Steve Zahn's amazing. Coming to Yeehaw.
Coming to Yeehaw. And also Stifler's mom. I forget the actress's name. I can never remember her name. Stifler's mom from fucking American Pie. She's in it.
Okay.
She fucking kills it.
Stifler's mom.
Damn, all about that early 2000s then, huh?
Wait, is that-
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah, it's not important. Anyway, I've watched the first 5 episodes. I've got
Jennifer Coolidge.
Jennifer Coolidge, thank you. I've got 1 episode left. Basically, the synopsis is there's like a newlywed couple, there's like a full-fledged family, and there's Jennifer Coolidge's character who is like a widow, and they're all like arriving to this like crazy nice resort in Hawaii, and they're on vacation for like a week or 2, and they all are dealing with various interpersonal issues, and we get to know these characters while they're on vacation, and they're supposed to be having an incredible time, but none of them are having a good time at all. We get to know some of the hotel staff, and shit just like gets messy. It's very much a drama, and like the characters are well written and like well acted, and it's just like a ride to get to know everybody, and their lives sort of cross over one another, their paths cross. I enjoy the shit out of it. I don't know how it ends, but I recommend you watch White Lotus on HBO Max. It's definitely gonna be worth your time. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got. That's what I've been watching. We got one more segment to get to, and that is our Hotline Screams.
Hotline Scream.
If you are listening and would like to call in and leave a voicemail to be featured on next week's episode, hit us up at 904-638-3231. We got 3 voicemails this week, and I forgot to write down who called in, so we're just gonna fucking find out.
All right.
Randy, play one. I don't know.
What up, squad? It's Logan, calling in from Denton. I was just calling in to talk about what I think Andy asked on the Friday the 13th episode. About watching Halloween movies pre-official Halloween movie watching season, which I usually would say is September. But with Halloween Kills coming out this October, my little brother being a huge Michael Myers fan, I wanted to take him to see it, but I also wanted to have seen the movies before it, so that way I could appreciate the movie itself more. And I am moving away from being close enough to him to be able to like watch movies. So we did start our Halloween movie watching early, but we were not simply throwing caution to the wind. We just had no choice. But it is safe to say I am also now a huge Michael Myers fan. We've only seen the first one and the 2018 version, though. Working on the other ones, but I do plan on watching them. So it's also just been really nice to have something to do with my little brother. We used to watch Disney movies together, and now we're watching intense, crazy slashers. So that's really nice. But hope y'all had a wonderful week. And I look forward to hearing more from you guys later. And as always, much love to the Slack crew. Y'all are the best homies out there. Peace.
Shouts out
right.
to Logan. That sounds
Nice
like
choices, Logan.
yeah, smart choice. Working up to Halloween Kills, watching all the Halloween movies. In
Yeah,
preparation.
fill that out a bit more, though. Don't
us
leave
know,
it at 2018. Good Lord.
Well, I mean, she's got to see Resurrection. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Gotta see
Essential viewing that.
Logan, here's what you need to do. Watch 1, 2, 4, and you're okay for the season.
I mean, if you're talking brass tacks and you're trying to get ready for Halloween Kills, you only have to watch 2 movies, and that is the original Halloween and Halloween 2018, and that's it. But I respect.
Yeah, so she's already prepared, really. But.
Yeah, her and her brother are trying to watch everything. I respect the shit out of it. I do want to say, my level of excitement for Halloween Kills is like completely unruly. Like it's out of control. It's my most anticipated movie of the year, and like I cannot physically wait to fucking see that movie.
God damn,
Jesus fucking Christ!
But like I do realize that it's probably not going to live up to what I want it to be, but like I don't know. I'm just excited, man. I'm just fucking excited for a new Halloween movie.
I'm excited for it to finally fucking come out so I can shit on it some more. No,
it was delayed a whole fucking year, so like the anticipation.
Let's see what one comedic bit completely derails the movie.
One comedic bit. Oh God.
Oh
yeah. I'm sorry. Did I forget about the half hour of banh mi talk we had last time?
Oh, they were feeding me nachos.
Guacamole in sexual ways, which you know.
What? That was hilarious. That was fucking hilarious. The funniest shit I've ever fucking seen.
Anyway, Logan, God bless. I hope you and your brother have a great time watching all the fucking Halloween movies. That is a wonderful thing to do with your little brother. It's very sweet. Looking forward to Halloween Kills. Randu! Who are we hearing from next? Nobody knows. Let's find out.
What up, nerds? So, on first note, Soju, I don't know if you've heard, there's actually a Scooby-Doo movie thing called the Scooby-Doo Project. It's like a mashup of Scooby-Doo and the Blair Witch Project. It's on YouTube. So I think if you just look up the Scooby-Doo Project, it should pop up. And now, for spooky season, once it's consistently under 60 degrees, that's when it personally starts for me. I plan on cracking it open with either Malignant or The Conjuring 3 if that comes back on HBO. I Live Alone and the Malignant trailer had me sleeping with the nightlight on. James Wan, Do Not Let Me Down. So, we'll see. The concept of spooky season for me personally, I think it's been thrown out the window because of streaming services. Like, if Hulu's streaming Jason Takes Manhattan in March, I'm not going to cross my fingers and hope it's there in like November or some shit. Like, happy St. Patty's Day, we're watching Jason Takes Manhattan. Speaking of the best Friday the 13th movie, when are y'all doing that one? All right. Y'all have a good one. Stay chillin'. Bye.
What was the movie she said?
Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh, I mean, that one may take a while. I don't know.
Yeah. When are we going to get to that?
It's not a priority.
Which one? Say. I mean, we've done now the first Friday the 13th, the 4th, and the 6th in this.
Yeah, those are the 3.
So, I mean, come on. We've covered quite a bit.
Yeah, honestly, like if somebody picks it, we'll get to it very quickly. Yeah. But like if we're just gonna like happen upon it, it's probably gonna be a while.
Yeah.
There's a lot of classics to get to before we get to the fucking boat that's supposed to pass as Manhattan.
I love hearing about as soon as it's consistently below 60 degrees, like that is January in Florida. Like we can't
that's
wait
tough
that
in
long,
Florida.
I wish.
I'm still I get it though, because I really I could not have gotten into the spirit when I was in Jacksonville this past week.
True. We were at the beach like every fucking.
You're at the beach drinking luau drinks. The fuck? Yeah. How am I supposed to feel spookified?
Fucking Florida, am I right?
And it's not that just Florida though. It's still hot here in DC. So I mean, I'm waiting on the air to cool a little bit, like a little nip in the air, and I'm all game in. But I haven't broken the seal, and I think that might be a big reason why. Actually,
this is about usually like the last week of August is when it hits in like Seoul, where like the temperature significantly like becomes different. So like I get that, like it just has a different crisp in the air, just the smells and the wind. Yeah, for sure.
I've literally wished that was the case, but it's just not. We can't wait on the weather, unfortunately.
Yeah, we just got to do our own thing and watch Charlie Brown.
Being cold ever again. Yeah. So I don't think we have a limited engagement with that.
Yeah, I haven't had a winter in 6 years, so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Damn, Bob.
Thanks for calling in,
Bobby Drama over here.
Bobby Drama.
Did we get a name
Probably
on that?
Like 3 years. If we're being real, but anyway. Thanks for calling in. Randu, we got one more from God Only Knows. Let's find out.
God only knows what this
boys, it's Jack. I haven't called in a bit, so I decided to do it. And it's officially Friday the 13th today as I'm calling. which is almost like a little holiday for anyone who's kind of spooky. I'm actually going camping this weekend, so I will be camping on Friday the 13th. I don't think we planned this. It just sort of happened. We both were like, oh, okay. So if I get murdered, you never hear from me again. Jason got me. I'm sure I'll appear in some movie somewhere whenever they get their lawsuit shit figured out. That'll be great. I'm also going with my girlfriend, so I'm definitely going to get murdered because this is the forte. I'm the right age. I'm with my girlfriend in the middle of the woods. I'm dead. I'm basically dead. We're probably going to watch the Friday the 13th, and you guys kind of had a discussion on which one was the best one. And I got to agree with Bob. Part 4, man. Part 4 all the way. I watched Part 4 and Part 6. I watched both of those at a Halloween marathon, and Part 4 definitely was the favorite. Part 6 kind of lagged towards the end. There's a lot going on there. If I remember correctly, that's the one with like the sheriff and his daughter, and there's all this stuff that you really don't care about. And yeah, if that's the right one, that one's not that great. But Part 4 is awesome, man. That one's great. You got Crispin Glover, who's just a tour de force of everything in that movie. You got everybody is obsessed with jumping out of windows in that movie. Like, even the dog jumps out of a fucking window in that movie. It's incredible. And there's that dude that, like, halfway through the movie just comes out of nowhere, and he's obsessed with killing Jason, and then he faces off against Jason and instantly dies. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic movie. That entire movie's phenomenal. But I forget exactly what I wanted to call in for. I had some sort of question. Oh, yeah. Randy is reading House of Leaves. He said, I am also reading House of Leaves. I'm a little bit through it. I think Randy said he just started it. So I've gotten through about half of it, I think. I'm reading a ton of books right now, but House of Leaves is one of them. And I didn't know much about it besides the fact that people told me it was good. Someone told me that it will make you afraid of the dark again. And I was not really about it. I was like, yeah, okay, it will make me afraid of the dark. But I wouldn't be lying if I didn't have a night where I was home alone and I read it, a good portion of it, and I went and go take a shower. And while I was like in pitch blackness, like looking at nothing, I genuinely got like the creeps, like something was there with me. So that book does subconsciously seem to seep in at times. Despite the fact that I think it's a little much at times, but it seems to be something's affecting me on a subconscious level where it's starting to make me a little geeked out, which is the sign of good horror. I'll finish off this Friday the 13th special phone call with saying,
nothing, because that's the end of the recording.
Ran out of time.
Shit. Ran out of time.
We will
Jack.
never know.
The impotent hunter, Jack, is who you're referring to.
The impotent.
If he doesn't get got by Jason, he'll get got by whatever's in House of Leaves.
His wife killed him. That's what happened. We'll never hear from Jack again.
It's all a metaphor for his wife's murdering him.
Oh,
I think it was all about.
I never knew.
All about the implication he was going with his girlfriend that would be murdered on Friday the 13th. I think we know what's going down.
Yeah. They're dead.
69.
69 dudes.
69
in the woods.
Whole dudes. Yeah, I am reading House of Leaves. Like I said, I still haven't gotten much further than when I started because I got distracted by this Defense of Ska book. So I am not anywhere near like having this book affect me yet. I'm still just trying to get a grapple on the storytelling structure, really. So that's where I'm at. I will update in the future.
Tight. Thanks for having my back, Jack, for Friday the 13th Part 4, final chapter. It's the must-watch of the series. Hopefully you're not dead. Hit us up, call in, talk about some shit, throw on some accents. We're into it. Again, if you want to call and leave voicemail for next week's show, hit us up at 904-638-3231. We're going to be back next week with a brand new show. As always, we're talking about the brand new Nia DaCosta flick, The Candyman.
Candyman, 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 Candyman,
Candyman,
Candyman.
You guys remember having to record that really badly over Zoom?
It's impossible.
Like we're trying to do right now
because of the delay.
Dude, to prepare for that, you guys need to go listen to the Light and Shadow podcast.
Buzz marketing.
Dude, Nicole did a great job. She combined. So last year, leading up to what we thought was the release date of Candyman, we all did an episode about a Candyman film featuring, on the Light and Shadow podcast. And so she just recently merged those all together into one giant podcast. So to get ready for that, go fucking listen to that shit. It's gold. I was listening to it this weekend.
It's gold.
Yeah, Justin was a guest on Light and Shadow podcast talking about the original Candyman. I was a guest talking about part 2. Rainey was a guest talking about part 3. Nicole did a super cut. You can listen to all 3 of those episodes. It's the most recent episode available on Light and Shadow podcast. Slam that into your ear holes. Get ready for the release of the brand new Candyman movie coming out this Friday. We're going to be talking about it. We can't wait to finally see it. Until next week, please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at STR8_chilling, on Instagram at Straight Chilling Podcast. You can send us an email through our website, straightchillingpodcast.com. And until next week, as always, all you mother truckers, please keep chilling.
God damn, these people are confusing.